Good afternoon, everyone. Since we're a couple minutes after 12, I want to go ahead and get us started. I know we may have a few more folks that roll in the next couple of minutes, but just to help make sure that we get moving and stay on track, I want to get us started. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for being here. My name is Charles Allen. I am a member of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm also the COG Board Vice Chair, and I'm also the co-chair of this DMVMoves Task Force. And I'm now officially calling this meeting of the task force to order. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's final meeting of the DMVMoves Task Force. Over the last 18 months, COG and WMATA have worked with a wide-ranging and diverse coalition of leaders from our region, from governments, transit operators, business and community organizations, to create a unified vision and sustainable funding model for our transit network. And of course, 18 months ago, many parts of our world looked a little bit different, but one thing hasn't changed, that there is a goal, there is a need, and there's an understanding that our region must have a roadmap and a vision about how we are going to grow our transit network, to do so in a sustainable way, and to do so that moves our entire region forward. Countless hours and hours of discussion and deliberation have been spent developing the recommendations that we are going to be reviewing today. And again, my thanks to everybody who participated in all of those. I want to start off by thanking all of those that served on the Government Partners Advisory Group, the Community Partners Advisory Group, as well as the 6 work groups. I also have to give a big thank you to all of the COG and Metro staff, our facilitator, Nick Donahue, that have worked so hard on this initiative. And as I think we can all agree, a reliable, safe, and more seamless transit network is essential to an economically successful region and an enjoyable community for all of our residents to call home, which makes our work on this DMV Moves initiative so vitally important. Today, we're going to be reviewing and voting on the DMV Moves Plan Executive Summary and recommendations as outlined in the resolution. This includes the DMV Moves Vision and Goals, the Transit Investment Needs, Plan and Accountability and Transparency Measures, all of which we will be reviewing today. And of course, to be certain, this portends even more work for all of us ahead. The recommendations coming out of today's task force meeting will then go to respectively the COG and the Metro boards for their consideration in the month of November. So now it has been an honor to be co-chairing this with my friend Paul Smedberg, and so I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair to say a few words to help us get started as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Smedberg, WMATA Board Vice Chair and Co-Chair of the DMV Moves Task Force. Great to be with you here today and to see the continued commitment by so many partners dedicated to advancing mobility in our region. As Co-Chair Allen said, it's been 18 months since the historic first meeting between the WMATA and COG boards that launched the DMV Moves Task Force and its advisory groups. That meeting marked a turning point, one where our region came together to take a comprehensive look at how we can shape a more connected and reliable transportation future. We have made considerable progress building consensus, a shared understanding of what it will take to create world-class transit for the DMV. The recommendations being presented today reflect not only months of analysis and stakeholder engagement, but also a common vision for improved mobility, supporting economic growth, and enhancing the quality of life for everyone in our region. We have a full and productive agenda ahead with plenty of discussion planned. I encourage everyone to engage actively in today's conversation, and I trust that you've had a chance to review all the materials distributed in advance. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Also up here at the dais, we're joined by Nick Donahue, who's the facilitator, but we're gonna move directly to public comment. Individuals have signed up prior to the meeting. They each have 90 seconds. And our first speaker today is Stuart Schwartz with the Smart Growth Coalition. And you are not Stuart.
Hi, good afternoon. Stuart sends his apologies. He's under the weather today, but my name is Bill Pugh. I'm the Transportation and Climate Director for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. And CSG appreciates the opportunity to serve on the Community Advisory Committee to the DMV Moves Task Force. And we thank all of the elected officials and staff at all levels for their hard work on this initiative at COG, WMATA, MDOT, NVTC, and local staff. And we commend WMATA for identifying and implementing more efficient programs and cost-saving measures. Yesterday, we provided detailed comments, concerns, and recommendations for further action. Broadly speaking, CSG thinks the task force has made real progress, and we strongly support the additional funding commitment of $460 million per year. At the same time, we urge more specific implementation commitments in your resolution. We ask for continued efforts that identify dedicated funding. We also ask the region to find operating funding sufficient to implement the bus priority corridor recommendations and also WMATA's visionary bus network. The region should not have to continually embark on these costly task forces when long ago we could have prioritized additional and dedicated funding. We note that a large share of highway funding is on autopilot, and the highway sector receives little to no oversight of its performance and spending. Again, we appreciate and support this vision, and we ask you to build on the work of this task force. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Our next speaker is Kate Mattice, the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, followed by Pat Sheehan.
Good afternoon indeed. My name is Kate Mattice and I'm with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. But in this capacity, I'm also serve as a member of the Virginia General Assembly's Senate Joint Subcommittee 28 on the growing needs of public transport in Northern Virginia. I'm speaking here on behalf of Senator Adam Ebbin, who is the chair of SJ 28. SJ 28 was established in early 2024 to focus on examining the funding needs, reviewing cost containment strategies, and identifying potential funding sources to ensure the transit systems that serve Northern Virginia have sustainable and long-term funding to meet the needs of our entire region. Specifically, SJ 28 was created in recognition that maintaining and modernizing the region's transit network requires legislative action to secure predictable and bondable funding sources. So as the DMV Moves effort was launched merely weeks after the Virginia General Assembly's effort, it's no surprise that the Virginia-focused subcommittee, which is made up of key state senators and delegates from the Appropriations, Finance, and Transportation committees in Virginia, would pull directly from the work of this group. So while SJ 28 has not completed its work, I'm pleased to report that just last week, it endorsed funding need levels for Northern Virginia's transit systems that included recommendations for funding for ongoing operations for WMATA, support of the capital share of Virginia for towards the $460 million and growing that were coming out of this DMV Moves recommendation, as well as additional funding for VRE and our local systems. Thank you so much. I'm happy to share more information later.
Thank you, Ms. Mattice. Patrick Sheehan with Metro Accessibility Advisory Committee, followed by Caitlin Rozier, Greater Washington.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the mic as well.
The mic is on.
Where's the mic? Good, thank you. Hi, my name is Pat Sheehan, Chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee for WMATA, and representing the disabled community on Community Partners Advisory Group. First of all, thank you for including the disability community in your deliberations. Too many times that's not been the case, and we appreciate being able to give input. If individuals in this room depend on transportation for people with disabilities, it is a lifeline. Areas that we have been very interested in have been areas of bus prioritization, bus rapid transit, and also fare signage, and ensuring that that is accessible for people with disabilities. One of the areas that I really appreciate that we had great information on were the recordings of the sessions that were done last December, March, May, and June. There was so much good information between automation and areas, budget, bus prioritization that were discussed. Whenever my committee and disability community wanted to understand what was going on with this task force, I sent them to that information. It was rich, it was dense. We got to hear from the experts. We got to hear from the information that was given to us at those meetings. and we appreciate that very much. We hope to be part of the solution going forward. Thank you very much for including us.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Caitlin Rozier with Greater Washington, followed by Sean Townsend, the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington.
Thank you. I'm Caitlin Roger, Deputy Executive Director of Greater Washington. Thank you for the opportunity to address the task force and take part in the Community Partners Group. We appreciate all the participants' sincere dedication to this process. The proposal for dedicated index capital funding of $460 million for WMATA is laudable, and we support the task force in passing this important recommendation. At the same time, the recommendations don't fully meet the bold ambitions that the DMVMoves process started out with and don't reflect the input of the community's Partners Advisory Group. Earlier this week, we and other community partners detailed our concerns in letters sent to the task force chairs, so I think they're familiar with them. Some of those include WMATA needs one or more dedicated, recurring, regional sources of funding, especially in an era of less predictable federal support. To ensure that decision makers have complete information about potential sources of funding, DMVMoves should merely support the study of, not the implementation of, but the study of congestion pricing and land value taxation alongside other options. To support transit ridership long-term, DMVMoves should obtain time-bound commitments from participating jurisdictions leaders to rezone land proximate to transit to enable increased development. And finally, while the regional bus priority concept and the integrated service guidelines are good steps, the DMVMoves should go further in identifying funding-specific implementation steps and deadlines. DMVMoves have admirably attempted to confront the complexities of a region where incentives for regional coordination on transit are missing. So we ask that you incorporate those above points in the final recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Townsend, Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington, followed by Rick Ryback, Just Economics.
Good afternoon. I'm Sean Townsend, President and CEO of the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington and a member of the Community Partners Working Group. For our industry, safe, reliable, and frequent transit isn't just nice to have, it's essential. Restaurant workers often start before sunrise and finish well past midnight. Many depend on Metro to get to work and home safely, and our guests rely on it too, whether they're coming into the city for dinner or headed to a neighborhood spot across the region. This funding proposal is about more than infrastructure, it's about people. It ensures Metro can maintain a state of good repair and invest in the future. We can't afford to slip back to the days of deferred maintenance and unreliable service. Indexing the new funding at 3% annually is also critical. Like restaurants, Metro faces rising costs, labor, supplies, and energy. This adjustment simply reflects the economic reality of running any major operation. The Community Partners Group brought many perspectives together, and the resolution before you represents balance and some boldness. On behalf of the restaurant industry and our thousands of employees, I urge you to support it so Metro and our entire regional economy can keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Rick Ryback, Just Economics, followed by Jaron Price, Downtown DC bid.
18 months ago, this task force was established to identify equitable, efficient, bondable, and sustainable funding for transit. Some months ago, the Sierra Club, Coalition for Smarter Growth, Greater Washington, Local 689, presented testimony regarding congestion pricing and land value return as transit funding techniques that would meet these criteria. Both techniques have been used successfully in the United States and abroad. I'm not surprised that the task force didn't immediately endorse these ideas, but I was deeply disappointed by its lack of curiosity. Few, if any, questions were received regarding either the theory or the practice of these successful and fair funding approaches. There has been concern about transit riders not paying fares. Most of us agree that those who benefit from transit should help pay for it. Yet those who benefit the most from transit are those who own commercial land near transit stations and stops. A congressional study from 1980 showed that with the Metro system only 1/3 completed, the rise in land values near the stations had already exceeded $2 billion in construction costs. For every $100 in transit-created land value, landowners return only $10 to $20. How can the task force demand that riders pay fares while affluent landowners reap huge windfalls? How can the task force ask taxpayers to fill transit funding gaps without first obtaining a return of transit-created land values from those who receive them?
Thank you, Jaron Price, Downtown DC bid, followed by Emily West, Greater Washington Partnership. I don't see Mr. Price. Is Ms. West here?
Good afternoon. I'm Emily West. I'm the Senior Vice President of Policy and Initiatives at the Greater Washington Partnership. We're a nonprofit alliance of leading employers who represent more than 620,000 direct and supported jobs through economic activity across the region. And we know that many of these employees rely on a robust public transit system to access opportunity. We want to express our gratitude for the opportunity to participate in this process, especially being cross-jurisdictional and community-driven. The partnership values collaborative approaches to our pressing challenges, and we commend the task force for the comprehensive and inclusive dialogue. You'll have to excuse me, I lost my voice cheering on the Washington Wizards last night. They put in a good effort. So as the partnership continues to work with our region's leading employers to finalize our comments before the November meeting, I'd like to briefly highlight some areas of progress that are important to the partnership. We commend the task force for the pragmatic approach to funding and appreciate the work to getting to the final goal of $460 million. We know this represents a commitment to fiscal responsibility, scalability, and a thoughtful stewardship of public resources. We appreciate the inclusion of an annual report to the Transportation Planning Board. We know that regular reporting ensures enhanced transparency and that stakeholders remain informed and engaged. And finally, we applaud WMATA's transformative service improvements and congratulate Randy and the team for their many awards and improvements over the past year. We look forward to remaining engaged throughout the rest of the process, and thank you to the task force.
Thank you so much. Ms. West was our final speaker. If there's anyone here today that would like to submit comments, Mr. Allen and I encourage you to do so through the DMVMoves website. Now we'll move on to our WMATA update. I'd like to introduce Randy Clark, the WMATA GM, and Tom Webster, the acting CFO. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair Smedberg. I used to say chair a lot, so Co-Chair Smedberg. Thank you, everyone. I want to just really start off with truly a big thank you on behalf of the whole organization, both our co-chairs, every member of this task force. You've committed a lot of time, as Mr. Allen just mentioned, hours and hours and hours to this. Lots of reading, lots of participation, including going out to our signaling room not too long ago. It really means a lot to the staff to see so many important people in this region, elected officials and key stakeholders out and participating and seeing what Metro really does on a daily basis, and the support that you all provide is important. I want to thank Clark, the entire COG staff for partnering with Metro. Again, this is pretty symbolic here. Metro and COG for the first time in 50 years have done this. And I think that alone is a big deal to get this type of coordination at a regional level. The level of transparency that we've gone through. I think some of the public comment about highways never gone through the oversight that obviously we've done in this exercise is true, but really appreciate Clark and all his leadership on this. Jack and Brian, I know Brian's not with us, but both Brian's effort and Jack's efforts have been extraordinary. They have full-time jobs, and to jump in and help with this is a big deal. Brian did a lot of financial analysis with his team. We do a lot of oversight on that, and I appreciate, we got a lot of hard-hitting questions and a lot of hard meetings. It actually makes us better, and I think it makes us a better partner. So I just want to really recognize them and all the partners that participated. So thank you. Quickly on Metro, we're really proud of where we are as an organization. It's not that long ago that we were in a significantly bad spot where we didn't have trains. We had a very big shortage of employees, not a lot of customers, and a lot of fare evasion, a lot of other challenges. But I really am proud of the 12,000 plus members of the WMATA team. We have a great WMATA board that's doing great oversight, engaged in policy. really moving us forward. I want to highlight we've led the country in ridership growth for over 2 years straight. We're the only large agency that carries more people on bus than we did before the pandemic. And, that is a big deal. We're going to get the best recovery of any place in the country. Even with the federal shutdown, which is definitely hurting us from ridership, not going to sugarcoat that, just like it is on all of our jurisdictions. We'll probably still move 900,000 people today, even with the federal government shutdown, which is just amazing to think about. Crime was a really serious topic here at Metro, both real and perception. And I know a lot of you, was the first thing that you engaged me on when I had this opportunity to have this role. I'm really proud of the work we've done. We're currently on pace for the lowest crime year we've ever had in the history of Metro. And the number one thing that we see in our customer satisfaction scores is people's perception of safety has gone up immensely. Our employee surveys also show that they feel much safer out on the system doing their work. Reliability is up. On-time performance on bus in September was the highest on-time performance in over 4 years. And on rail, we've had 5 or 6 of our best days in years in the last 3 or 4 weeks. We are going to continue to work very hard on safe, frequent, reliable transportation. I want to acknowledge that in FY25, we ended the fiscal year $120 million under budget. That allowed us to do about a $28 million carryover to help balance this year's operating budget. So again, not touching operating subsidy and actually delivering a little bit more service as well, and $90 million back into the capital account. So over the last 2.5 years, we've identified over $500 million of cost savings and cost efficiencies at Metro. And I just, it's been a lot of hard work. Just really want to acknowledge that's in capital, operating, our CBAs, you name it, everyone's kind of pulled into that. Just kind of lastly, I want to highlight on this slide is kind of a summation of all that is we were really proud to win the APTA Agency of the Year award. And that award is the top agency in North America. WMATA the last time won that almost 30 years ago. And that is reflective of our peers. So our peers in the industry have said that we are now on the top in the country. That doesn't mean that we don't have more to do. We'll never stop. I know our board expects that of us and we expect that of our team. But I think it's a nice moment to pause and realize where we've got to as an agency, where we were, and I think the platform we can grow from. I think the big comment is we don't want to go backwards. And the effort here was really about identifying what it's going to take on that to ensure our purchasing power, to ensure we don't go backwards. Lots of people remember the teens and how hard they were. And I think we all would be better off for our economy and quality of life if we don't go backwards. Last comment would be this effort has been fantastic. We know it's just the start of a very long, complicated process between now and the end of the spring. But we want to thank all of our supporters, elected officials in the room. You do, it's not just this is the next piece of what you've all done in your whole careers, but we stand ready to support you in Annapolis, in Richmond, the Wilson Building, on Capitol Hill. Any way you think that Metro could be your partner to help advance this cause, we are here. The doors are open. We're here for tours. We're here for weekends. We're here for nights. You name it. We are here to be that. And so thank you again for all your hard work and your support. It really, really matters a lot to the staff. And I just want to acknowledge that. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We're next going to move to agenda item number 3. I'm going to turn over to our facilitator, Nick Donahue, who's been collaborating closely with both the advisory groups and the task force over the past several months. We're walking through the presentation and final recommendations. Before I do that, I did want to just make sure that I noted for the record and for everyone here that we have got a couple of folks that are sitting in as proxies for DMVMoves Task Force members, and just want to make sure that I read that out so that everybody knows who is here and in what capacity. So on behalf of Aisha Braveboy, we have Kevin Stephen. On behalf of Mark Ehrlich, we have Chris Conklin. On behalf of Tracy Haddon-Lowe, we have Valerie Santos. Those are the 3 individuals that I have as proxies here. And then because both Scott Surville and Mark Sickles are in the special session, Mark Sickles has asked Jeff McKay to represent him, and Scott Surville has asked Paul Smedberg to represent him. Both Scott Surville and Mark Sickles issued statements that's been passed around as a part of everyone's packet. So just for the standpoint of transparency, I want to make sure I read through that so that everybody's aware of that. All good? Okay. All right. Nick Donahue, let me turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you, Chair Allen, and thank you, members of the task force, for coming this afternoon and for your continued participation over the last 18 months in the DMV Moves process. I've been asked today to kind of go over a recap of this initiative, the final recommendations, and some of the steps we've been through along the way before we move some of the discussion on the resolution that will happen later in the meeting. So as a reminder, we are a growing region here. We are expected between now and 2050 to add more than 1.2 million new people to this region, more than 800,000 jobs. With that, we have a lot of transportation projects that we've identified, but we are still falling short of many of the aspirational goals that this region has identified. So you can see, I apologize, the clicker went a little rogue on me there. You can see some of those things here. We're looking at a 12%, 15% increase in driving, but a 70% increase in delay. We are expecting a 24% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to a 80% target that the region has established through its long-range planning process. And so that's kind of a long-winded way of saying there's work that we have to do as a region to make sure that as we grow, we achieve the region that we're hoping to see. And as a part of that, transit is really important to delivering on the vision that we're hoping to see for this region. It is a big driver of economic activity in this region. I think we often talk about how transit drives a lot of the commercial and residential development in the DMV. $330 billion in property tax value exists around metro stations. 70% of jobs are within a half mile of a transit service within this region. It's really critical to all basically connecting DC, Maryland, and Virginia, but it also helps connect us to the region's 3 airports and in turn to the world. So transit is a core part of our transportation network, which is a big part of why we're having all of these discussions. The other reason, though, that we're having these discussions is as a region, our transit system is at a place where a lot of discussion was necessary. So we came together in 2018 and provided $500 million in dedicated capital funding to WMATA. Because of how that's structured, and that it doesn't grow with inflation, we are going to be at an inflection point sometime in the next 2 years where WMATA will lose the ability to continue to issue new debt. And what that's going to do is shrink their capital program by hundreds of millions of dollars a year, somewhere between $600 and $800 million on an annual basis. That means we are at risk of not having the resources necessary to sustain the state of good repair of the system or make any modernization investments that may be necessary. In addition to that, we are different than a lot of other regions in that we have 14 different transit operators in one metropolitan region. If you go to other parts of the country, like a Denver or other places, there's one big regional agency that handles all the service. And so I bring this up not to say that having that is a problem, but it's to say that there's work that we have to do as a region to integrate and coordinate service between these different operators. And so looking at how can we improve that is like a big part of what we need to do as a region as we continue to grow to maximize the investments we make in all of these different transit operators. As Chair Allen and Chair Smedberg noted earlier, we have this task force here that we formed as a part of DMV Moves and which has been supported by the 2 advisory groups, one formed of community partners, chaired by Jack McDougall, and another representing government partners that was chaired by Brian Hill. And so that is kind of the core of the DMV Moves initiative that the WMATA board and the COG board put together 18 months ago. Through this effort, we have identified a new vision for transit in this region, kind of what do we hope to achieve. I'm going to read the first part here, but not read all of the 6 kind of bullets here. You have seen this before. Nothing has changed since we talked about this kind of last fall at the task force. But again, kind of a core vision and goal for the DMV Moves is that transit is a backbone of an integrated world-class mobility network that makes the National Capital Region a thriving global economy, a preferred home, and a leader in innovation, environmental sustainability, and social equity. This is something we developed working with those task force and their advisory groups, and their input, and then obviously brought back to the task force and received your feedback last year on that. We have used that vision as a core kind of guiding post as we've done a lot of the work at the advisory groups, talking about the recommendations and investment plan that we'll be going through here in more detail. Last fall, we really had a talk with the task force about where do you want us to focus? At that point, right, there are many directions that we could have gone. The direction that we very clearly received from the task force was focus on maximizing the use and value of the existing system. Like we have made billions of dollars of investments in our rail network, in our bus systems, in our commuter rail network. Focus first on how do we get the most out of that and make that your core kind of what you look at DMV Moves. Once that is done, then the region can start to have other discussions about longer term plans and expansion. But the focus of DMV Moves, again, with direction from this body back at the advisory groups, was really maximizing how our existing system works and what we as a region get out of it. And so again, that along with the vision has really been kind of pushing the direction in which we've moved. We've done a lot of work on the proposed investment plan over the past 18 months. We originally started with a number that's much higher than the number that is before you today. And again, the number that is before this body today is $460 million in new dedicated ongoing capital funding. But we started at a much higher number. We started at $700 to $750 million. That included operating funds that at that time we believed were going to be necessary to create a sustainable operating support for WMATA. Due to a lot of good work at WMATA, and then also through fare increases and ridership continuing to rebound, we no longer have any issues on the operating side. That is addressed and believes that will be addressed long term, and so there's no longer an operating ask in there. We further, though, have refined the capital ask and have driven that down from $500 to $600 million to the $460 million that you see here today. And a key change in that is we are no longer looking to eliminate entirely the state of good repair backlog. Instead, we are seeking to bring it to a place that is manageable and where the system is reliable for customers and safe. And so just like other transportation systems, with this investment plan, WMATA is going to continue to have a state of good repair backlog, but it will be a manageable backlog kind of moving forward, and one that WMATA believes will still allow to provide the customer service that this region deserves. I think this chart is really important whenever we talk about what the investment plan, how much funding is requested in the investment plan and what is going to be provided by that. So there's two lines on this chart here. The orange line is WMATA's estimates of what will happen to its state of good repair backlog without the increased funding that is being recommended by the advisory groups to this task force here. And so just kind of as a quick reminder, back in the 2016, 2017 timeframe, WMATA's state of good repair backlog was, I think, $3 or $4 billion above where it is today. I think we all remember how the system performed at that time. There was many issues with reliability. There were safety concerns that we all discussed. Without funding, it looks like about in the 2035 timeframe, we will start to return to where we were in that period of time. Unfortunately, things don't get better from there without the increased funding. And you can see the state of good repair backlog continues to grow. With the increased funding, we will be able to manage kind of the backlog at WMATA and keep it at a place where we are at least at the state of good repair today, if not better, on a sustainable basis moving forward. And so this new funding will ensure that we do not have a situation like we have today where, because we have a fixed ongoing source of revenue, that we cannot support the capital budget. This new funding will support a sustainable revolving bond program that will support Metro's capital program out into the future as far as we looked. And the way we kind of have looked at that is once you start to get into these outer years here, where you're paying off the original debt that was sold with the $500 million in funds, and that allows for an ongoing continued issuance of these bonds into the future. And so we don't run into a, quote, my words, nobody else's, fiscal cliff like we have staring ahead of us here in the next 2 years. So what does this investment plan do to us besides kind of the state of good repair here? First, it's going to do the state of good repair, as I said, but then it's also going to be reinvesting and modernizing the Metro Rail system. And I'll get into some of the details of that as we go into some of the future slides here. We are also asking, though, as a part of DMV Moves, that the region partner with WMATA on core bus priority projects and seek to do project development to explore the opportunities to move those projects forward. I want to be very clear to the task force. You gave me as the facilitator direction that was not ambiguous. There is no funding in this 460 that is going to bus priority investments. This is an ask for the region to work with WMATA to advance these projects, and to the extent to which good projects come out of that, go seek discretionary funding to try and build those. There's a lot of virtue and benefits, particularly from a rider perspective and a cost perspective to bus priority, but we heard clearly from this body that we just weren't ready yet to create a regional bus priority fund. So I want to just clear be as clear as I can be about that. In addition to that, as a part of DMV Moves, we have gone and analyzed the other operators in this region, and the funding figures you see here is something that provides kind of an indication of some of the operating capital needs that exist for those existing systems. I want to stress that does not include every potential valuable local transit project. So for example, I know the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority has done a BRT plan. This does not include the capital investments for there. That does not include the capital investments say for the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Project or other key things like that. This is again using the same principles that you gave us, looking at the existing transit system as it is today and how do we maximize the use of it. And so again, we have a breakdown of all that information for each individual jurisdiction, and this is just an indication, right? There's no funding in the 460 for this either, because as we talked about at previous task force meetings, you all made it clear each jurisdiction would be looking at its own kind of funding solution there. And so as a part of that, we wanted to ensure that as you had those discussions back in your home jurisdictions, excuse me, you had an indication of what other funding needs beyond WMATA might be. Also, though, in DMV Moves is a whole host of policy recommendations working towards how can we make the 14 different operators in this region appear to work in a more seamless and integrated manner from a customer standpoint. And so we have a number of recommendations that are built into the DMV Moves recommendation plan, that have come out of the work of staff throughout this region. So first, I would just want to take a moment and thank all of your staff at the individual transit agencies. Without them, we couldn't have got to the place where we are today. But we are looking at things like how do we make fare policy more consistent? How can we advance regional service design guidelines, and importantly, things like performance reporting? And so there's both funding recommendations as part of the DMV Moves plan, but then also policies working towards making the transit network in this region operate in a way that feels more integrated from the customer standpoint and hopefully also drives improved ridership and other efficiencies. So this slide here just outlines again the WMATA funding plan here. It invests in two areas: rail modernization and reinvestment and state of good repair of the system. On the rail modernization side, what that is going to bring forward for the region is improved reliability, greater safety, increased capacity of the system, and when combined with bus priority, it will address the core capacity constraints that exist today from Roslyn Tunnel to Stadium Armory. I know that's an area we've had a lot of discussion about. And in the past, WMATA was studying, I think it was called the Bloop. Forgive me, Randy, if I'm saying that wrong, but the big study of adding a new tunnel through all of downtown DC over through to National Harbor. The cost of that was around $30 billion. And that was the strategy for a long time to try and address the core capacity needs of the Metro Rail system. We have before you today an investment plan that is dramatically less than that, but will also address kind of those core capacity needs of the system through rail modernization combined with bus priority. So this slide here shows you what the ask would be of each of the three jurisdictions. And again, this is at a state or district level. Here from the 460, this is proportional based on existing kind of allocations on the capital side there. And so you can see 460 before the funding cliff is reached in FY29, growing at 3% a year. And so you can see there's the figure for the district, Maryland, and Virginia. And again, everybody does it differently. And people may do it different in the future than they do it now. So I know in Virginia, there's a Commonwealth, there's a local split that traditionally has been there. We can obviously provide those figures, but today we wanted to stick to a kind of top line level to help people understand what that ask might be. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the commitments that would come out of DMV Moves, as well as some of the accountability and transparency provisions. So I want to start with what WMATA would commit to the region with this existing funding. First, they will commit that this system will be maintained in a state of good repair with this additional funding moving forward. Secondly, they'll be committing that with this funding, they will be able to have a sustainable revolving bond program to support their capital budget long term. So again, said differently, we're not at a place where in 8 years, we're having a DMV Moves 2.0 to have a discussion about WMATA's capital needs. We are working to address this longer term. In addition to that, we are asking WMATA to develop a 20-year capital plan that would be updated every 5 years outlining where these investments are going to go from a kind of a programmatic standpoint. For those of you who have been involved in some of these funding efforts longer term, you may remember that prior to 2018, WMATA did not have a kind of always have a 6-year capital budget. There was what was called the capital funding agreement. Sometimes that was 6 years, sometimes that was 2 years, but that was the only insight that you as funding partners had into kind of the capital ask from WMATA. So a reform we put in place in 2018 was that WMATA had to create a 6-year capital improvement program and update it annually to kind of provide a sense of what the needs were going to be moving forward and what those where those investments would go. What we're now asking WMATA to do as a part of this process is to look out even further into the future to give you a kind of programmatic sense of what those needs are in terms of categories. So again, just kind of providing more insight and transparency for you all as funding partners. In addition to that, WMATA is committing to live within a 3% cost cap on a unit basis of service. And so for those of you who are funding partners, what we're saying here is that if today you buy an hour of bus service and it costs $1, next year it will not cost more than $1.03. And the year after that, please forgive me, I'm not the best at math, it will generally be $1.06. I know for those of you who are good, there's a few more decimals there, but I can't do that math in my head. But the kind of point here is as a region, you will know what the transit service that you're buying is going to cost this year, next year, and into the future. That is not something we have today with the way the current 3% subsidy cap works. And so to me, this is a pretty big commitment that we're receiving from WMATA. What WMATA in turn, oh, sorry, there's one more thing, I apologize. In addition to that, what we're asking for WMATA to do is to provide to COG and TPB what I call kind of an annual health check. So when I talk about 2018 and with other folks in this region, everybody had a different set of assumptions about what was supposed to be achieved or what the anticipated outcomes would be. What we have made and gone out of our way to do this time is to document what are the outcomes and what are the assumptions that underpin that. And then with this report, track those on an ongoing basis so we can start to understand if an assumption we have made is turning out that it's slightly off track or really off track, indicating to the region we may need to recalibrate because we have a problem because an assumption we made that we, with the best of intentions, turned out for other reasons to not be correct. The flip side of that is as we're tracking these assumptions, as everything is going well, and WMATA says, hey, I have a problem, that's a moment to have some very tough conversations with the management at WMATA because we were told that there should not be an issue as long as with these assumptions kind of generally being right moving forward. And so what it's giving this region is kind of a look ahead that will give you a warning signal if things are starting to get off track and give us the opportunity to correct that, but also understand whether or not it's an issue within WMATA or an issue in terms of we thought the world was going to turn out generally one way and something extreme has happened and that just isn't the case. So the commitments WMATA is asking for from the region in exchange for the funding of this is that the new funding grow at 3% a year, that they receive it before they reach their debt capacity in FY29. They're asking that the region and its transit agencies and jurisdictions work with them to advance the 6 policy areas that we've identified. Again, talking about fare integration here, performance reporting, regional service design guidelines, things of that nature. That the region also partner with WMATA on advancing product development and then implementation of the bus priority corridors. And then also asking that TPB, kind of keep track of everything. And when they receive those annual reports, work with the region to explain what is happening and, whether or not things are moving in the direction that we thought, but also to track whether or not the progress we're making on those 6 policies to make our transit system more integrated and seamless. So we've talked about the policies and some of the funding things. There's also other work we as a region will need to keep doing on an ongoing basis to ensure the success of the transit system that we have here. So, key things here are looking at opportunities to create new growth and economic development around transit station areas, to work to implement transit-oriented development. Those are things that the jurisdictions need to continue to think about, and I know have been thinking about as we move forward. And then on the WMATA side, we need WMATA to continue to look at what are capital investments that can help lower the operating cost of the transit service that we have. I really want to commend the WMATA team. They have, for the first time, brought forward very substantial and serious capital investment strategies that will help bend the operating cost curve down. So, again, on rail modernization, one of the things it's going to do, I talked about safety, increased capacity, and increased reliability. It's also going to make it so each hour of rail service costs less money to provide. This is the first time we've started to have some of those discussions, to my recollection, when we're talking about WMATA. They've also brought forward the bus priority concepts there, where we can, for a one-time capital investment, create ongoing savings on the bus side. And just again, as a quick reminder, when we're talking about bus priority, one of the biggest cost drivers when we're talking about bus service, we always talk about gas and labor, but there's also congestion. And so today, if it takes 5 buses to provide service during peak hour and traffic goes up 10% on that route, WMATA's going to have to add a new bus in 2 years. So you have to buy a new bus, you have to buy 20% more gas, and you have to pay 20% more for labor there. And that's not because we were getting more service or better service for our customers. In fact, they're getting slower trips. But what we're doing that is just to maintain the existing service levels that we have today. And again, the bus priority concepts that WMATA has brought to us will help stop those sorts of cost increases on these high ridership, high frequency routes that we have. Apologies. I've developed fall allergies, so my throat is a little dry here, so please bear with me. So I want to talk just very briefly about some of the policy recommendations. I'm not talking about all 6, so please don't worry. We have action plans, though, to back up all of these areas. And again, your staff have been heavily involved in this. But I do want to talk about 2 of these in particular. So one of the things that we have worked with all of the transit agencies in the region is to say, if you are a transit agency who is charging a fare, and again, we understand certain systems have gone fare free. Nothing I'm going to say would require any change to that. But if you are charging a fare, that the fares for all of the systems that are doing it work the same way. So what do I mean by that? Every jurisdiction that's charging fare has a different kids ride free policy. Let's make it simple. A student should ride free. We have different universal transfer credits. Let's change that. Just it's the same everywhere. And so, one of the things we've heard from riders of the system and from the Citizens Advisory Committee at TPB is it's very difficult at times to use transit outside of your system because the rule, or your home jurisdiction, because the rules are different. So let's try and make these rules work the same to reduce the barriers and hurdles to kind of people choosing to use transit for more of these types of trips. One of the other things, though, that we want to talk about is performance reporting. So as we make these investments, in various bus systems and bus routes, that we all report on how those routes are working. And the intent of this is not to say, oh, this route got a, quote, a low grade, we should look at cutting it. The real answer is, okay, if this route is not performing as we expected it to, why isn't it? Is it because of traffic congestion? It may be that it needs to be rerouted slightly, like the design had an issue. So really just always kind of looking at how the system is functioning, continuing to analyze it and try and make it work better year over year, and the ability to do that kind of throughout the region, which is not something that we have today. Lastly, I want to talk a bit about the bus priority plan. What you see here are several identified high priority corridors throughout the region. Some of these already have projects that are kind of moving forward. So for example, on Georgia Avenue, there's a project today from Florida, I believe, to Eastern. I'm looking at the WMATA team so they can tell me if I got those limits wrong. I'm getting a nod that I'm generally right. So again, some of these projects are starting to move forward. What we are going to ask the region to do, and again, this is outside of the funding recommended for DMV Moves, is to partner with WMATA to implement discrete segments on these corridors and to start within the next few years product development work to then identify the specific project that could be advanced in a given corridor and then seek to advance and implement that project as we move forward. So in closing, this slide here summarizes the benefits that we hope to realize from the DMV Moves recommendations, but I think also really importantly, the risk of not moving forward with the DMV Moves investments. And so again, without increased funding, WMATA's capital budget will shrink $600 to $800 million a year. The net effect of that is that in short order, the state of good repair backlog will be back to where it was before the dedicated funding from 2018. We also will not be able to move forward with the rail modernization investments that help increase safety, reliability, but also importantly lower the kind of per unit operating cost of the rail system. The inverse is true again if we are able to move forward with these policies and the increased funding. We expect higher ridership and revenue. We expect a safer, faster, more reliable, and more cost-effective rail and bus service. And we also expect enhanced and improved customer service. And so, Chair Smedberg and Chair Allen, that kind of concludes my readout on the recommendations.
All right, thank you very much. And that would be, catch me up here, agenda item 4.
So we now would move to Jack and Brian.
Right, so I'm going to item 6 from our advisory groups.
Yes, and I
Just
want to
trying
note,
keep
I'm not sure if Mr. Hill is going to be ready at this time because we're a little ahead of schedule.
Well, we're going to turn it over to Jack McDougall, and he can just speak very slowly to make sure that Brian has time to get on. But I really am grateful for both Brian Hill and Jack McDougall for their leadership on our 2 advisory groups. And so what I'm going to do is kick it over to Jack McDougall first, and then we'll double check and make sure that we've got Brian Hill, who was unable to be here in person but is joining us virtually, who will join in just a little bit. But Mr. McDougall, let me turn to you.
Great, thanks. And on behalf of the business community, it's always great to be ahead of schedule. So good afternoon, co-chairs Allen and Smedberg, members of the task force, regional partners. I want to thank you for your leadership and for the work that has been done throughout this process. I also want to thank my fellow advisory committee chair, Brian Hill, and the members of both advisory committees, along with Clark Mercer and his team at COG, especially Conti and Monica, for guiding this effort. And thank you as well to Nick Donahue for his thoughtful leadership, technical expertise, and steady facilitation. I also especially want to thank and recognize WMATA General Manager Randy Clark, his leadership team, especially Tom Webster, for their responsiveness and the significant progress that they have delivered. As we discussed earlier, being named APTA's Transit Agency of the Year reflects real improvement in safety, reliability, and customer experience. Without that progress, we would be having a very different conversation today. I'm Jack McDougall. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Washington Board of Trade. It's been a privilege to chair the Community Partners Advisory Group. Our committee brought together business, labor, community advocates, and nonprofit leaders. We debated really tough issues, and while we didn't agree on every priority, we reached meaningful consensus around the need for integrated, reliable, and sustainably funded transit across the region. This work is especially urgent as the federal government restructures and disruptive technologies accelerate. Our region must be able to compete for talent, investment, and innovation in a rapidly changing economy. If we can't move people, we can't move opportunity. That's why the recommendations before you matter. They provide $460 million per year in new bondable capital, growing at 3% annually, to keep Metro safe, modern, and efficient. Securing durable, dedicated capital funding is something this region has struggled to achieve for decades, and reaching consensus on this framework is a milestone worth celebrating. The recommendations also set a path to align our 14 transit providers into a seamless regional network. As Nick was mentioning, fair policy, service guidelines, training, and priority investments. That's how we move from a collection of systems to a coordinated platform that supports riders and drives economic growth. We've heard thoughtful feedback urging us to go further. Continued work on exploring dedicated operating funding, stronger bus priority implementation, accountability delivery, workforce transition strategies, and regional studies of tools such as congestion pricing and land value capture are very important next phase conversations. But we must act now. The upcoming legislative sessions present a narrow window to secure long-term stability. If we allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good, we risk losing momentum, weakening public confidence, and slowing economic growth. Not supporting these recommendations would take us a step backwards and push us farther from the work that many of us want to pursue next. From the business community's perspective, this is about competitiveness and quality of life. Metro and our local transit systems support over $25 billion in annual economic activity, connect nearly 1 million trips daily, and underpin our ability to attract and retain talent and capital. Failing to act would cost far more in congestion, lost productivity, and diminished trust in our region's future. This plan is not the end of the journey, it's the beginning, and we strongly support continuing a community advisory body as COG leads the next phase with clear milestones, transparent reporting, and regional accountability. Greater Washington has the assets, the talent, and the vision, and now we need the resolve. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDougall. Administrator Hill, Mr. Hill, welcome.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to hear Jack speaking today. It's been a long journey to get to where we are. I apologize for not being there. I'm actually in Raleigh, North Carolina, getting ready to speak about AI and the regionalness of AI. So I'm getting out of my car now. What I really want to say is I want to thank my partners who were helping us get to this place, the CAOs from Northern Virginia, as well as the district Administrator Kevin Donahue and our friends from Maryland. The first time we got together, it was $1 billion request. We were able to get to about $460 million for a world-class system. That is the goal that we have, is a world-class system, but it's a regional world-class system. We have systems that we have to think about going into the future. Mark, VRE, WMATA, that is a regional purpose that we are moving forward with. I want to thank each and every one of us who are working on this project to get to where we are today, but it's still a lot more work to do. And please note, we are not finished with our work. We have a lot more to do, and I'm hoping that this start has provided us with the impetus of getting everybody on the same page and moving us all forward. I want to thank WMATA and their team for helping us get to where we are today. I want to thank Clark Mercer and COG, as well as Nick Donahue and all the folks that helped us to get here today. Again, VRE, Mark, WMATA, Northern Virginia, the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland. We all need to build it together. We all need to build it strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. We'll now turn the meeting over to Mr. Allen.
All right, thank you very much. So we want to be able to kick off and move into a discussion phase, both on the recommendations, the plan, and the resolution. But to be able to formally do that, what I'm going to do is make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Well, I haven't actually moved yet. First, I was going to explain what we're going to do, then do it.
Oh, okay.
I know we're so excited, though.
Yeah.
Then after that, we'll move to be able to do questions and discussion. I have a hunch there might be quite a bit. So if you would help, just so that we can help manage the conversation. We've done this before, where if you'll just kind of turn your table tent a little bit askew, that'll help us know. And I'll try to keep a line up and do my best to move around and make sure that we do that. I shouldn't have said that first, because now everyone's moving their tents already so fast. So let me make this formal. Let me move to approve the DMVMoves Task Force resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm going to take co-chair's privilege and recognize my co-chair, Mr. Smedberg, for a second. Thank you, though. So we have a motion and a second. So now let me turn to any questions or discussion, and I'm going to do my best to follow the lineup that I saw. Mr. Conklin, I think I saw your tent first. Mr. Mendelson, I saw yours, and then Mr. McKay, and I'll kind of try to keep the lineup going that way.
Thank you, Chair Allen. I'd like to propose a couple friendly amendments to the resolution. These amendments have been shared with the staff ahead of time, so that I believe they're available for everybody to review. These amendments are largely about clarity on roles and some of the sub-initiatives within DMVMoves related to bus priority and regional integration and the reporting. And there is one more substantive suggestion that the resolution look to approve the recommendations outlined in the resolution in DMVMoves plan executive summary, knowing that the full plan is not yet available for the task force consideration. We understand that plan will be available for the joint board. So I'm happy to answer any other questions about those amendments that we've recommended. I do believe they're friendly and hope the chair sees them the same way.
Thank you very much. First off, I appreciate your work over the last day on the specific language of that. So my appreciation to that and our partners in Montgomery County. I view it as friendly. I just want to make sure everyone had a chance to get a copy of those amendments. They are also up on the screen right now as well. So I just want to turn to my colleagues here to make sure if there were any other questions about it. but barring any objection.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Conklin, if we could maybe just point out the three quickly.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely. I'm
'cause
happy to go
it's a
through
little
them
hard
more fully.
to see on
And
the screen. Yeah.
I have a sophomore in high school whose eyesight is about like mine at this point, so I recognize the challenge in reading it from a distance. On page 2 and about the middle of the page, there's a suggestion about adding as appropriate to the coordination on any funding or project development activities with WMATA on the bus priority projects. On page 3, there's a recommendation. Again, this was the more substantive one that the task force looked to approve. What's recommended in the resolution and the DMV Moves executive summary. Later in that same section, there's a recommendation to change the language about the indication of the needs of local transit operators, which there has been work to quantify that, but again, there may be not complete alignment between local transit operators' views of what those gaps are and what's reflected in this plan. So it's a change in the language to reflect that. And then again, regional priority corridors. I'm trying to clarify the roles of WMATA jurisdictions and stakeholders in developing those plans. Those plans don't yet exist. There needs to be a plan framework for each along with the institutional arrangements to implement those plans. And then the last recommendation near the bottom of page 3 is suggesting that the reporting by the Council of Government be inclusive of all of the elements of DMV moves, in addition to the specific regional coordination elements that were previously mentioned in that section.
Yeah, thank you. And on that last section, I want to note in particular, I think that language helps ensure that it is both broad enough and encompassing to hit all those elements, but also maintains the specificity of those particular elements. So I appreciate that.
And just for your information, you should have a copy with the red line at your dais, at your desk. There. Oh.
Actually, I'm not sure if it was handed out. That's why we have it up on the screen above. Should clarify that. Okay. Are there any objections? Otherwise, I would accept it as friendly.
On the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Augustine.
Senator Augustine.
Senator Augustine.
Thank you. This change still refers to a plan that we have not seen. Does it not? Even though you're still making this amendment, I'm just trying to understand.
It is to
maker of the amendment.
Because I'll let the maker of the movement speak to that.
Senator Augustine, I appreciate your question, and we had exactly the same feedback when we first saw the resolution. So our amendment was to suggest that the action is to approve what's included in the executive summary that we have received, which also includes the principles for moving the DMV Moves plan forward, and the elements of the resolution itself, recognizing that, again, like you, we have not seen a produced plan. And frankly, I have also received questions from constituents on some of the fundamentals that we expected would be in the plan once it's available.
And so the reason
I can't answer the question on when the plan would be available.
Right. So some of the reasons for concern are that you are talking about the executive summary, understanding that there are concerns with the underlying documentation, which still is significantly a part of the work of this body. I'm just trying to get clarification on, I understand what you're trying to do, but I'm wondering if what you're doing really helps us, relieve concern.
In our view, it only relieves the concern that we understand the full plan would be available for the joint COG WMATA board to adopt as part of their public process. But again, your statement of concern is the same as ours, and that's the motivation.
But as a task force, as us voting on it as a task force, though, the attempt is to move this out because we don't even know what it is, the plan?
Our intent was to have the task force endorse the things we do have as a direction for the plan rather than a plan we have not seen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Senator Augustine, did that help answer your question? Okay. So without any objection then, I would accept the friendly amendment. All right, thank you very much. All right, next in the lineup, I had Mr. Mendelson, followed by Mr. McKay, Ms. Robinson, and then Senator Augustine. I didn't know if you had put your tent back up. That was from earlier. Okay. All right, Mr. Mendelson.
Thank you. So I have a concern about this resolution, and it's a significant concern, but let me be clear. It has to do not with the total dollar amount, but how it's going to be allocated. Most of the resolution, I would say all of the resolution, except for that one issue, is fine with me. I think it's important that we are moving forward with recognizing we have a regional system that needs more support so that it is more reliable and more state-of-the-art and more something we can be proud of. I don't have a problem with the $460 million. I know that there's been a lot of negotiation, maybe I shouldn't say negotiation analysis over the last couple of years that's come to that number. It was significantly higher before. And I've looked at the resolution and looked at it some more to try to understand how it's allocated between the jurisdictions. And that's the rub for me, because I'm assuming, and what I have been told by others is the assumption is that it's going to be allocated among the jurisdictions according to the same formula that we've used elsewhere, and it's a formula that I've objected to before. I think the very first meeting of DMVMoves, I objected to the formula. I think the district has, for too long, paid more than its share of the cost for operating WMATA. And I had hoped that when we began this process a year or two ago, that we were going to look at part of this would be looking at whether we could come up with, we could agree to a regional funding mechanism rather than, as usual, just falling back on the same old, we're going to allocate between the jurisdictions just as we have before. And I recognize that coming up with regional funding, a regional funding mechanism, like I'll just put it out there, a regional sales tax, is going to be difficult for the jurisdictions to agree on. So we've taken the easy way out, which is we've punted and are not addressing that at all. But the result is that, as I understand it, the district will be paying 38% of this $460 million. 38%. Maryland will be paying less. Virginia will be paying even less. And just so that you all have a sense of the context here, Maryland's budget, as I understand it, is about $67 billion. That's 3 times what the district's budget is. Virginia's is $87 billion roughly. That's 4 times what the district's is. The district's budget this year is $22 billion. Now, we've actually set aside some money, sort of theoretically. The city administrator has said this before, that we have in the budget, the council has approved an increase of 1 cent in our sales tax. That would fund about $130 to $140 million a year, not $174 million. If we were to take the 460 and divide it by one third, then it would be roughly $150 million, which is more than our sales tax, but it's something I think we could figure out because the district is very much committed to WMATA and supporting WMATA. And we have usually been the first in line, and if not the first, right there with at least one other state in supporting WMATA. So this is really about the issue of money and how it's allocated for me, which makes it very hard for me to support this because implicit is that if I vote yes, I am supporting that the district will pay 38% of the cost. And we just can't keep doing that. We are constrained, I think every state is, but we are constrained. Our revenues are flat going out the next several years. And we are already looking at significant structural problems in our budget. We have cut back significantly on social service programming, health services, significant cuts to health benefit programs that the district has offered, environmental programs that district has offered, and so forth. And I have to be careful how I say this, but the district is unique among the jurisdictions at the table here because we are the whole thing in terms of funding. I want to say me, but it's me, my colleagues on the council who are here, and the mayor. I'm the only one who has to come up with all the money. The other jurisdictions, there's ability to spread it. Well, I'm hearing it not true, but the fact is we have a $22 billion budget. We do not have a $67 billion budget. So this is a struggle for us. It's a struggle for us to come up with $140 or $150 million a year additional. It's more of a struggle, and I think unfair if we have to come up with more than a third. And I had really hoped that part of DMVMoves would have been to look at how we're more equitable in recognizing that this is a regional system. not a District of Columbia system first and then the other two states. It's a regional system. It's a regional system that supports employees who live in one jurisdiction and work in a different jurisdiction. And it's a regional system that supports economic growth in all three states. And I dare say that the two states have more economic development potential overall than the district, which, as you know, is constrained in its boundaries. I'm still debating whether I'm going to vote no. If I vote no on this, then I'm, in a sense, rejecting all of the rest of the resolution, which I support. But I do not want my vote to be construed as supporting what I think is the unfair and is the implicit allocation that the district will have to pay more than the two states that have far more resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mendelson. And he's my chair on the council, so I didn't want to cut him off. I definitely appreciate that. And I want to note, I think you've been very consistent for a very long time around your concerns related to funding formula. The mission, of course, of the DMV Moves was not inclusive of tackling the issue of what is the split and what does that funding formula look like. So I think that those concerns are certainly things that are legitimate and continue to have those conversations. I just don't believe that the DMV Moves process was geared to try to tackle the funding formula issue. Within it, it was really more about shaping what is our regional vision of where it is we're trying to go. So notwithstanding the conversation that can certainly follow and in other venues as well. But I very much appreciate your comments. Next, let me turn to Mr. McKay. I had you up next on my lineup.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I have a question, and then just want to share my thoughts on the resolution. But my question is probably for Nick Donahue, which is the proposed resolution. Would you construe it as consistent with the recommendations of the SJ28 working group? And that, of course, is the Senate Joint Resolution Working Group in Richmond that's also been tackling this same challenge.
Yes, sir, I would. I would say that SJ28 has a slightly broader view in some of the things that it's looking at, but in the Venn diagram of overlap, I do not see inconsistencies between the two.
Okay, thank you. And for us in Virginia, I think that's an important piece of this to understand that this is not running counter to some of the activities that are taking place among our General Assembly members who, of course, as was mentioned earlier, cannot be here today for obvious reasons. And I want to start my comments by following up on something that Mr. Mendelson said, because I think if you surveyed every individual around this table, we probably all have gripes with the funding formula. Frankly, I would love to see jurisdictions in Virginia that are not in the WMATA Compact, but enjoy huge ridership numbers, also in the funding formula and paying for their riders. Because many of us in Virginia, of course, in our jurisdictions, because of the way the funding formula works, are subsidizing riders who have no residence and no financial interest in the jurisdictions to which the stations they're walking through. And so obviously fixing the funding formula, I think all of us would fix it differently. I think all of us have challenges with it. And I agree with Mr. Allen that I think that's outside of the scope of what DMV Moves is doing, but not an unreasonable conversation to continue to have in other avenues. And so I just want to acknowledge that as a starting point. I want to thank a lot of people here, but I want to start by thanking Metro, because I think I've shared with this group before that I think my last day on the Metro board was almost 15 years ago. And I say that in context because, you know, I've been close to the Metro situation for a long time. And I don't want to grow the heads of WMATA leadership too big, but I will tell you that in my years, I've never had more confidence in the leadership of Metro. And I want to start with that because some of the challenges that many of us came to the table with when we started this, first, and I think a majority of people around this table believe the number was way too big for us to be able to tackle. And that was before the fiscal challenges that almost every jurisdiction here is now enjoying today, that we were not in the thick of necessarily when we started this effort. Certainly with the instability of the federal government, that was not at the forefront. So I want to thank them for helping to drive down the number to a number that is now reasonable. and more importantly than reasonable, doable. I also want to thank them for the components of this that I think lay out the duties of all of us. You know, this is not just Metro's problem. This is all of our problems. And I think the duties as they're outlined are really important. And for me to go back to the taxpayers of my jurisdiction and tell them we are supporting additional money for Metro, there's some obvious things they need. They need oversight. They need, you know, future clarity on what our financial commitments are going to be. They need control over cost escalation of Metro, which of course all of this includes and I'm not trying to stir the people from Maryland, but the cost escalation for Metro, which I think is really critical to make sure that for those of us who are paying big bills, we have that predictability moving forward. The oversight piece is absolutely critical. And I appreciate the components of that. But I think, you know, for us to go back to our stakeholders, we have to acknowledge a couple things. We have to acknowledge the urgency of this moment. We don't have another couple of years to solve this problem. I think we have to acknowledge that this resolution doesn't do everything for everybody that everyone would want. And I appreciate Mr. Conklin's work on fixing some of the language in here. I went through it and would have changed a lot of the language in the context of wordsmithing and clarity. But I think the points that are in this are really important and guide us as we move forward. And many of us here serve and protect Metro in different ways when we walk out of this room. Some do it within our jurisdictions, some do it within the business community, some do it at a state level, some do it at other regional transportation bodies, all of which have a role to play in making sure that this works. So, you know, when I think about the number and what we're asking Virginia to do, there will be people who will first ask, what do we get out of it? And I think the pieces that are in here on the oversight and clarity are what we get out of it. But most importantly, what we get out of it is how important Metro is to the financial stability of our region. And I agree with others who have talked about this from a regional standpoint. The other thing that we get out of it, certainly on Virginia's side, is a big challenge when we leave here. And so not everyone might agree on what the number is. This resolution, I think, drilled down the number, as I said earlier, to something doable. But when we walk out of here, there will be critics of now, how do you solve for that number? And so I really appreciate, and we brought this up as a group many times before, about the autonomy of how the compact payers figure out how they're going to pay this. Because each of us is probably going to have a different answer to that. And we are going to have a big challenge in Virginia. There may be clarity at this time next week as to how big that challenge is politically, but we are going to have a challenge tackling this number. I don't want to make this sound like this is an easy lift by any means whatsoever. But the opportunity we have is to make sure that we're partnering with our Virginia elected officials in the General Assembly and making sure that Virginia understands how important Metro is to the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that has been a problem that I have been dealing with and others have been dealing with in Northern Virginia for a very long time. This resolution, I know the resolution when it comes to Virginia will point out very clearly that $1.5 billion of economic activity happens because transit exists in Northern Virginia. That $1.5 billion goes straight to the state general fund. And so Virginia has to do its part to support Northern Virginia. That's a different problem, I know, than some of my colleagues around the region have. But this is an important moment for our Virginia elected officials to also step up in a very meaningful way to help us with Metro long term. So I would just encourage everyone to take advantage of this moment. This is bigger than what this resolution says. This is huge for Metro in making sure that we have a system that people here can rely on and support long term. Absent this, regardless of whether we think the number is right or wrong, absent this, we don't have a solution. And we certainly don't have a solution in a timely enough fashion to take advantage of the legislative actions that are going to have to take place after this to fulfill the financial commitments that the jurisdictions here are making. That's going to take some time. And we have to get out of the way now and say, this is what needs to happen, and do our advocacy within our communities to make sure this happens. But I would not have had this confidence. I certainly didn't have this confidence when we first sat down. And I thank everyone for their contributions, most importantly, from my standpoint, to drive this number down into one that can actually be accomplished. And I think the uncertainty that all of us are facing right now is probably a challenge looking at these numbers. But I would just encourage all of us to act, not just in this moment of what the financial situation of our jurisdictions today is, but act in this moment about what we want this system to look like 15, 20, 25 years from now, because none of us can predict the financial situation our jurisdictions are going to be in next year. But I can tell you this, I've got a lot more confidence knowing in what I'm going to owe Metro in the subsequent years after we leave here from a predictability standpoint than I've ever had before. And so I think those are all things that, you know, I hope sink in with everybody here. And I know I'm looking forward to supporting this. It was mentioned that I'm carrying the vote of Delegate Mark Sickles as well. I've had extensive conversations with him. I want to thank him because he's going to play a major role in getting whatever this is through the General Assembly. And he is fully supportive as well of the resolution that is before us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. Next, I had Ms. Robinson, and then I have Ms. Randall after that.
Thank you. As a Virginia representative, I have a lot of questions and concerns about this resolution, but I wanted to start by thanking Mr. Conklin for his edits. It was a highlight for me, though, however, that I just don't see how we should be approving a resolution or even an executive summary that doesn't have the full plan ready to go with it. That's kind of the most important point I think I wanted to make. A couple really minor details in page 1, the 6th whereas clause, it states that the task force is made up of all elected officials. I'm not an elected official. I believe it should say and stakeholders potentially. A couple other comments I wanted to make was regarding page 3 in the 4th resolved clause. There's a lot of specifics about progress reports, but it doesn't seem comprehensive. I would have hoped that it would ask for progress reports on all action plans. On page 3, the 5th resolved clause, it talks about supporting an increase to PREA. I am not aware that this was discussed before seeing this resolution, and I believe that would mean an associated state match that would need to go along with that. And I'm a little bit unclear as to whether or not that is part of the $460 million ask. I don't think it is. I have a lot of questions about the 3% per unit cap. I'm very unclear on how that would be implemented, but my understanding is that WMATA per unit cost has gone down each year, which is great. And I'm a little bit confused as to how capping per unit would continue to incentivize that if cost efficiency. I'm also unclear as to how this couldn't potentially open up the jurisdictions for somewhat of an unlimited subsidy if we were just increasing service. So maybe Nick, you could address that for me. Finally, I don't think there's enough clarity on the implementation of the action plans. And to be honest, without full Maryland and DC buy-in, this plan doesn't work. So I'm anxious to hear from my jurisdictional partners, and thank you for your comments. I will say with regards to DC, in my role as DRPT director, I also serve as the chair of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. And I think that proportions are fair if you look at the vast amount of work being done by each jurisdiction on different projects. For example, Virginia's 100% funding the new Long Bridge, and I know that's going to benefit the entire region in a big way. So I think the proportions are fair, but without buy-in of both of the other jurisdictions and more clarity, I don't think the plan works. It's going to be really hard for Virginia to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. If I can, I'll try to work through the points you raised. On page 1, 2, 3, 4, was it the sixth whereas? Great catch, actually. So I would propose actually just striking the word elected, because I think we all are officials representing different facets of that. So I would recommend we just say comprised of 22 officials rather than elected officials. Great eagle eyes and catch on that without objection. Okay, so we're just going to strike the word. Oh, sorry, I need a second. Thank you, Mr. Smedberg. Okay, so we'll accept that. On the third page, I believe if I followed, but correct me if I'm wrong, you were referring to the fourth resolved, or was the third resolved? It was the fourth passage. I was trying to keep notes as you were.
Was it the fourth,
That was the
Tiffany?
fifth.
I was sorry, I thought there was one you raised before you mentioned Priya, and that was,
Oh, yes, the fourth.
I think that the,
Regard to progress reports.
yeah, I believe that the amendment from Mr. Conklin that was accepted, because of the way we changed the language to make sure it encompassed all of the DMVMoves plan, would be all encompassing. So I think that to your point, would be encompassed within that. I'm going to turn to Mr. Donahue, if you wanted to touch on the Priya point, just to make sure you have that, which was the following resolved clause.
I just need somebody else to turn it. Thank you, Co-Chair Allen. Ms. Robinson, to your point, we did discuss Priya funding at length last year there. That was, I think, happened maybe before you assumed your current position and role. And so I do think it is correct to say this year we have not had extensive discussions about the Priya funding. It was a big topic of discussion, and I think one generally where everyone said the federal government's funding to the WMATA system should increase. It is one of the things that has lost substantial purchasing power since it was put in place in 2008. And so that was the intent of the ask there. To your point, if the federal government or Congress were to increase that amount, they may choose to increase the local match there. I don't think the resolution is saying that any additional funding beyond the 460 would be needed from the jurisdictional partners if Congress were to take that action, if that makes sense. So the other funding that is being raised could serve as that match. And then I'm having trouble with 3. Okay, and then on the 3% cap. So today, and I apologize for those who don't know or do know, because I'm going to talk about the 3% cap that exists today. So we have 3 funding jurisdictions for WMATA. 2 of those jurisdictions have a 3% cap on the subsidy from WMATA. And so again, that subsidy has no relationship to service. So what it says though is year over year, the subsidy requests from the WMATA board to the funding jurisdictions in Virginia and Maryland cannot increase more than 3%. Each of those 3% caps also has a different set of exceptions built into those. And so there's a variety of things that could allow the subsidy to go up more than 3%. Mr. Cornman probably knows the ones in Maryland better than I do. I know the ones in Virginia because I wrote them. But there's things like arbitration, lawsuit, capital projects that expand service, i.e. the Silver Line, and a variety of other things. I think Maryland has a slightly broader set of exceptions that exist there. And there's several things that I think have taken place since we've put that cap in there. So first, you've lost the connection to service. So in reality, as a jurisdiction, your subsidy to WMATA could go up 3% and you could receive less service. And so that's kind of I think an unintended kind of outcome there, and was not what we were seeking to get at when we wrote those provisions in 2018. I think importantly, what we're also really asking though for WMATA to do is to control the cost of the things they produce and allow the region to decide how much of those things they want to purchase, right? And that's not something that we have today with that existing cost control. So I understand the scenario that you outlined, but in that scenario, the region has made the executive decision to buy more. If the region makes the decision to buy the same amount, then every year their subsidy would actually just grow by 3%. If they buy less, in theory, their subsidy could go down. If they buy more, in theory, it could go up. But importantly, the direction is to the WMATA management is to control the cost of the things that they produce, which today is not what the 3% cap does. So that's the intent. I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that is the driving kind of goal behind that, is to make a commitment to all of the elected officials and to this region that when they buy service, they know what it's going to cost and how much it's going to cost. And as they, again, as they do it as a region.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Robinson?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next, let me turn to Ms. Randall and then Mr. DeFerranti. I've got you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank the two committee chairs and everyone who's worked so hard on this for 18 months. We've come a very long way in 18 months. Ms. Robinson, with respect, you and I haven't really talked or met, but I will tell you, I don't believe there's anybody sitting up here who has not talked about the federal government and needing to put more in it, the Metro, than me. The day I met Randy Clark, I think I said, "Hi, Mr. Clark, I'm Phyllis Randall, Chair of Loudoun County. We need more money from the federal government for Metro." I mean, literally, I believe that the entire region has been much too timid in asking, demanding, bringing together all of our elected officials in the region for more PREA funding for Metro government. And I have said that, I have pounded the table and said that for literally 10 years now. So that has absolutely been addressed. I also will say I will associate myself with many of the comments of my friend, Mr. McKay. I do want to say just a little clearer, because he touched on it, but it wasn't as clear. Chairman Mendelson quoted how much Virginia's budget is, but in this conversation, we're not talking about the Commonwealth's budget. We're talking about the regional partners in Northern Virginia where this money comes out of. And so, although we do believe, for all the reasons my friend mentioned, that we should be discussing that Virginia should do more, because Metro is so important to Virginia, and Northern Virginia is very important to Virginia's budget. So all those discussions, again, have been had for years. If we hadn't been having these discussions for years, I might not vote for this resolution today, but we have. We've been doing this for a long time, and I just can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. As an elected official who is building transit-oriented communities around Metro, and knowing that if we do not get this done and get this done now, Metro will not be able to be viable long-term. So we will be building communities around dead stations, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. This moment doesn't mean we're finished. This moment means we've started, and we have to build on it, and we know we have to build on it with rail and bus. But the building on it doesn't mean we can't start somewhere, and it certainly doesn't mean that we can't let some of our most vulnerable residents who have no other way to get around sometime not be able to get around. So that is why I have to support this resolution. I will ask one question, because Mr. Chairman Mendelson made a good point. He said, and it's a near quote, "I want to support everything, but I don't want to support the split, the money split." It is possible in Robert's Rules of Order to take out a section or what's called split a vote and ask, does everyone want to vote on everything else but the funding, and then go back and do the funding vote. So if Mr. Mendelson does not want to vote against all of it, but just wants to take a different position on funding, he can do that without voting against the whole thing. It's just a thought, so that you don't feel like that you're voting against the entire effort that we've all been working on, including you, sir, for the past 18 months. But for the good of my constituents, I will be supporting this today.
Thank you very much. Let me chew on that last question you had. I will say this is the funding is non-binding from the perspective of making jurisdictional commitments around those dollars. And so my first instinct would be not to separate it, because again, it's not a binding dollar amount that works. It is a recognition of what the financing need is. But let me chew on that for a little bit. But I know we have a couple more people in line up I want to make sure I get to. So Mr. DeFerranti, I've got you next. Senator Augustine, I have you right after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A thank you for all the pieces, Mr. Conklin, of your amendment, because they were right where we are in terms of the questions that we had. And for example, the phrase "as appropriate," which is either on slide 18 or 19, is not in the resolution, and the addition makes it easier for Arlington, and I think is very helpful. Also, thank you, Mr. Donahue, for calling out the specificity of this is not a specific capital commitment. We have been investing over the last number of years in Columbia Pike, which is one of the 6 identified, and that has a long and significant history, and those capital investments are concluding at the end of this year. So we can commit to a tiered approach over the next 6 to 8 years without, and the planning, but without to the specificity of a capital piece. And so with those 2 thank yous, I just want to see if I understand a little bit Senator Augustine mentioned the sort of conversation regarding what we're actually looking to, because the plan, there's the executive summary. And is it correct that we would anticipate that the full plan would then be written before going to the Metro and COG boards?
Yes, sir. That is the plan.
Got it. So I guess, it's sort of the bus priority is a detail that's super important, but it's a detail relative to the entire rest of the resolution. And I just think that taking the text of the resolution as it's amended, I can support it. I think that you have to look to the slide deck for context for interpreting it, and that would be relevant to Chair Mendelson's comments and all of it. But that doesn't mean you have to look to every word of the slide deck. There are fine print words in slide 19 and 27 that we would have heartburn over. But it's another more detailed way of saying, of hoping that we can find the significant good, even in the detail, and not lose on the interpretations of what might be in the whereas, the recitals, and the enactment clauses, because there's enough specificity in the 460 that it does seem to me as if it would be a mistake to not at least support the direction with respect to the specificity that is in this document.
Thank you very much, sir. Senator Augustine, let me turn to you next.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for all the work that's been put into this over the last 18 months. It's not, obviously there's a lot that has occurred here, and is the case, and we do this too, obviously in the Maryland General Assembly. We all kind of get down to the end and we're forced to have to make some calls and some decisions now. But with that being said, though, I do not really understand why we are foreseeing this to be the last day when we don't have the plan that would build into the resolution, that we would then be able to feel strongly and supportive of going to the Council of Governments. I simply cannot understand that. I'm also just struck by some of the feedback from some of the stakeholder groups that I hope would be a part of that larger plan and would be a part of this whole sort of conversation, and responded to more fully in there. I want to be able to be in the strongest possible position I can be to support this funding in the state of Maryland in a very, very competitive environment. Very, very competitive environment. And so while I understand this whole idea about, not having the, overall specificity, there's also a certain point where there isn't specificity and it's not helpful. And so I'm not exactly quite sure why we can't have that and build in some of those stronger things to this resolution so that it's able to help in the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Next, Mr. McAndrew, and then I've got Ms. Santos after that.
Thank you. And I'll start out by just, giving the collective body here kudos, right? This is not something that happens in many regions of the U.S. The dedication and the commitment to transit across the spectrum, public sector, private sector, nonprofit, multi-jurisdictions, what we have today bears that reality. And I think, the progress that WMATA has made over the last 5 years since, the first tranche of funds kicked in fiscal year 20 is truly impressive, and we're all seeing the benefit of it today. But, we are, as a region, I think everybody understands, facing significant economic, political, and societal headwinds. Those headwinds shouldn't stand in the way of making improvement in our investments that improve our social and economic prosperity. But we need to, at the state of Maryland, make sure that we scale and size the investments, and they should be measured. And we've had adequate time and to discuss over the last 18 months. But I think what's important to note, and this is true for anybody here that's managing a budget and multiple priorities, is that the unique needs for WMATA aren't that different than the unique needs for other areas just within the state of Maryland's transportation portfolio. We've got years of disinvestment in the Maryland Transit Administration's core transit system, and we're just starting to work our way out of it, not including years of failed promise on the red line that we're looking to address. We've also got, key investments we're making to try to reduce the roadway fatalities and bend the curve towards zero. And those investments are really important. And over the last 2 cycles of funding, WMATA, the state of Maryland has made the determination that investing in WMATA is critically important. We've done that at the expense of others because we haven't necessarily been raising revenue to do it at the same time. We have made really important decisions in recent years to raise revenue to stave off, fiscal cliffs of our own doing as well. But if we cannot raise revenue to meet the 460 target and have it grow at 3%, which is really important, grow at 3%. Right now, many of our revenues are not growing at 3%. And so if we are required to do the 3% and our revenues aren't growing at 3%, we need then to raise additional revenue above and beyond. So that is a challenge, and that's a reality that we're facing. But, I appreciate the approach that everybody's taken to the non-binding resolution before us. And I greatly appreciate the call in the last page, the resolve that, encourage, or it clearly states that this work can't be done without new legislation and consideration for new revenues, because if not, we're ultimately picking one over another, and that's going to undermine our ability to address our local transit needs or MARC in our instance, or other areas of the state. But, for the various reasons that's been stated today, but also additional need for the state of Maryland to further vet some of the funding assumptions, we're going to be abstaining today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McAndrew. Next, let me turn to Ms. Santos, then I've got Delegate Corman after that. And then Ms. Stewart, just saw you.
Thank you. As Councilmember Allen mentioned, I'm here sitting in on behalf of my colleague, Director Tracy Haddon-Lowe, Metro Director Tracy Haddon-Lowe. So my first set of comments are hers. She asked me to read them out for the record today. So today, members of this task force are voting on a resolution that proposes $460 million a year, new dedicated capital funding for WMATA indexed to inflation. I, Tracy, have heard from both stakeholders and members of the public arguing that the proposed resolution does not do enough. And I want to be clear that I wholeheartedly also want the region to do more. However, where I differ is that I do not believe in allowing perfect to be the enemy of the good, which seems to be a theme today. The need to do more is not a reason to not act or to do less. Solving WMATA's capital cliff can't be a hostage to other policy priorities, such as dedicated operating funding, future workforce, or bus economies of scale. Nothing is more important to this region than keeping Metro safe and reliable. Tracy also writes, I work on regionalism all over the United States. In fact, today, I, Tracy, am at a regionalism convening in Portland, Oregon, and here's what I know. Action comes from compromise. Consensus isn't always possible. We could wait forever and not get to it. It's okay to move with who is game. After today, I, Tracy, will continue the work with anyone who came to the DMVMoves table who wants to. Her vote is unequivocal. Yes, it is critical that Maryland, Virginia, and DC commit together to sustainably fund WMATA. I want to append, I should say, a few comments speaking on my behalf just quickly, which is acknowledging the milestone achievement, as has already been said. I'm going to channel my colleague Tracy, is known in our board meetings for creative analogies. So in 2009 and 2018, there was defibrillation of a sick patient, like jump-starting the sick patient, which had been underfed for many years in terms of deferred maintenance and other issues. And so jump-started back to life. And under the leadership of our general manager and senior team and many others also around this table, the political and other support, there's been a turnaround, particularly in the last several years. And it is a milestone achievement, I think Chairman McKay said about there's consensus about this future vision. And we should take advantage of this moment to affirm the alignment. And I was appointed to the Metro Board by the District of Columbia, so I'm going to speak from my hat wearing a district appointee and then at the end comment as Metro Board Chair. So I know the district supports the long-term vision for integrated transportation infrastructure in all the ways mentioned. So whether that's consistent ticket pricing, BRT, et cetera, leveraging technology to more efficiently use our infrastructure. And our Metro Board has been diving into details, many meetings, looking into the details about these capital investment decisions that are going to continue to take place over the next several months. And I know that Director Smedberg and Director McAndrew in particular, we've had plenty of conversations about these capital investment decisions and pushing for even more efficiency. However, I also want to acknowledge, I think it's critical to acknowledge the current economic context in DC, the District of Columbia, but also our region. So at least DC, we depend on property income and sales tax for our operating budget. And I quickly looked up the numbers. So 23% of our operating budget comes from property tax, 36% from income tax, and 13% roughly from sales tax. So in 2008, the global financial crisis, and then, the 2020, 2021 COVID-related downturns, the city and our region was resilient. But what's happening now is a tectonic change. There's not just the unpredictability of federal government policies and politics, but also the momentous change related to AI and technology, changing the fundamentals of our workforce and what that means for the demand for commercial office. In Q1 of 2025, and I know it's different around the region, but downtown DC has a greater than 20% vacancy rate. So again, keeping in mind that our budget is significantly dependent on the health of our downtown office market, I know that's a concern for our elected leaders who have the unenviable task of having to choose amongst the policy priorities. So WMATA comprises almost 7% of DC's budget. And the largest slices of DC budget are, in order of size, DCPS, healthcare finance, charter schools, and then WMATA. So I know clearly there is an ongoing strong commitment, but there's choices that are going to have to be made in the near future. I know that our elected leadership has already signaled and acted on willingness to raise money as needed to support WMATA, and as Chairman Mendelson mentioned, the sales tax increase. And the mayor and other leaders have led the city forward about taking a big bet on positioning us about becoming an entertainment and sports capital, which, fingers crossed, will benefit all of us in the region in the future. However, we're under a state of force majeure is probably the polite way to say it. There's so much in flux. So I think that there is unquestionably the district supports the concept and the vision. But due to the constrained revenues and the structural challenges, I know that we will be taking a hard look in terms of the WMATA board, looking at these issues, the questions, the decisions to be made about how money is going to be spent and what are opportunities to, whether it's delay investments and make certain trade-offs, because this is a time for difficult decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, let me turn to Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, let me just say what I think is obvious, which is that Maryland really doesn't take a backseat to anybody in the region for support of Metro. Our annual Metro contribution is about $1.1 billion. And I invite any of you to come with me to Talbot County or Allegheny County to tell them about that contribution that Maryland makes. And of course, 2 years ago, Maryland, in the leadership of Governor Moore, was first in line to say we need to catch up on the operating subsidy. But the great thing about this region is that Virginia, DC, the localities in Virginia can all tell the same story, because you all have your own examples of when you have been on the front lines to lift up Metro, which does have a regional benefit. So it's a great region to be a part of, and I'm really happy to be part of this effort. Spoiler alert, my vote is going to be yes, but. And the but is premised on a few things. One, as Chair Allen said, we're not able to bind anybody. I don't even speak for one other member of the House of Delegates, let alone the other 140. I definitely don't speak for any of the 47 senators. And most days I don't even get to speak to the governor or the Department of Transportation, so I don't speak for them. But I will vote yes, but. Another premise of my but is I'm actually a little less certain about the $460 million than many of my colleagues around the table. I joined Senator Augustine in that regard. For purposes today, I'm deferring to you all that $460 million is sort of the right number and makes a lot of sense. But I have been asking for and will continue to ask for a much better understanding of what amount of that is needed to maintain the progress of the last 7 years, what amount of that is needed for incremental investment in our signals, and how we can rework the signaling program to probably do it slower and less well than many of us would like, but that our taxpayers in the region would accept to make a meaningful change, but one that's affordable for the region. I also just still don't have a good understanding of the 3% cap as it's being proposed. I don't quite understand how you are determining the unit. So for example, the police force is not clearly assigned to one mode or another. So how is the overhead cost of the police being factored into that unit cost? I'll be honest, I got ahead of you all and started trying to look at what the Maryland legislative change would need to be to do this. And I got to that and I just said, forget it, I'm not even gonna put that in because I can't possibly figure out how we're gonna calculate and draft that. So I think I think it was Ms. Robinson who raised some questions about how that will actually work. So I understand it conceptually, Nick, you don't need to explain it to me for a fourth time. I just don't understand in detail how it would work. When I'm in Maryland, I always explain to people that WMATA has a math problem, and I'm partly the author of that math problem. The dedicated funding from 2018 doesn't grow, and that is a huge problem. But when I'm here, I'm going to explain to you that Maryland also has a math problem. Assistant Secretary McAndrew got at this a little bit, but take whatever the number is, our share of 460, however you want to slice that share up, and then multiply it for Baltimore, add to it for commuter rail and local bus, the ride-on, and the bus in Prince George's. And then, of course, divide out for all the other modes, because in Maryland, we have a single multi-mode transportation trust fund. So I'm a yes, but, I'm looking forward to actually getting to the implementation stage where the legislative bodies and the executive branches start getting into this and figure out exactly how to do this. And it will have to change. It will not be word for word what's in this resolution today, but I think this resolution is an important step to get to that stage because clearly something needs to be done. I think there's broad agreement on that and look forward to getting a yes period in the very near future. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And then I've got Council President Stewart. Let me turn to you, and then we'll come back to Mr. Smedberg and myself before calling for the vote.
Thank you very much. I wanted to have my partners in the state go first because I am very fully aware, as Delegate Corman reminds me, that in the county, we do not have a line item in our budget for WMATA. And so we do rely on our partners at the state. But that doesn't mean we don't advocate and will continue to, because in the county, our priority is ensuring for our residents we have a safe and reliable metro. And as Chair Randall said, we are all doing the transit-oriented development, and we don't want to do that around empty spaces in the future. This week, the County Council on yesterday, reviewed what's going to be our joint priority letter with the county executive to the state for our priorities. And one of the top ones is ensuring long-term stable funding for WMATA to ensure the economic vitality of our county. And I think as Nick went over the goals, the 6 goals, the one that has always stood out to me in this endeavor we've undertaken here is to enhance quality of life, economic development, climate resilience, and equity. That is really front and center. And while there are still many details to figure out, again, as Chair Randall said, I love sitting next to Phyllis, is that this is a process and we are one step in that process. There are a lot of details to figure out. and we need to do that. But in order to figure out those details, we need to continue the momentum forward. And I see this non-binding resolution as a way to do that. So I will be voting yes on this today. I do have a request, though, since I also wear the hat of being on the COG board, is a request that we get the plan a little earlier than maybe just a couple of days before November 17th, because when I sit on the COG board, I sit as a representative of my body. And I just want to make that really clear. So my votes, when I am sitting as the COG board representative, is I am sitting as a representative of the county council. When I'm here today, even though it's a little strange, I am sitting as council member Kate Stewart. And so I just wanted to make that clear and really request that we get all the details so that I have time to share them with my colleagues before being asked to vote on November 17th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I saw Mr. Donahue take a note on that. Thank you, Kate. Let me turn to my co-chair, Mr. Smedberg, for any closing comments.
Briefly, 20 months ago, Mr. Allen, myself, Mr. Clark, and Mr. Mercer sat in a room, and we talked about how are we going to address the issues that we've heard from many of you and former officials and elected officials about WMATA and funding and setting priorities. And that is why we are all sitting around this table today. Putting together DMV Moves was to really address and try to tackle once and for all the issues that we heard from many of you every single year. We understand the process is cumbersome, and there were systemic issues that people really want to start to address and earnestly talk about. And I personally think that this is a huge step forward. We know we have 2 governors that are going to be introducing budgets that are going to spark a lot of debate and questioning. But we wanted to have something in place. And again, this is not binding, but it is an important first step. And we wanted the legislators to have something as they go into their legislative seasons. So we can keep the momentum building. I am encouraged by the fact that you all have committed your time and your actual physical presence here at these meetings to commit to this. That says a lot to me, that you understand the importance of this. And I am fully confident in Mr. Clark and Mr. Webster and the whole WMATA team that we will have that specificity. And I know Clark and I will make sure that that happens, and Valerie and Joe. You know, I'm just really hopeful that this is the start of something that is going to once and for all address some of those key issues that people have about the annual appropriation process for WMATA. And I think this is a really good start. You know, again, this doesn't commit anyone to these figures. It could be more, it could be less, who knows? But I think again, it's an important first step. And well, actually, I think it's more than symbolic. It's more than symbolic. I think it shows that when we have an issue and something that is so important to this region, regardless of your current state of your economies or your social network systems, that transit is the main foundation block of all of that. And as we said in the beginning, this brings, if there's one thing in this region that brings everyone together, it's Metro. Metro Rail, Metro Bus, paratransit. It's the one thing that brings this region together. And again, I just really want to thank you all. I want to thank the task force chairs, the COG and WMATA teams, and all of you again for your personal commitment on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smedberg. All right, I'm going to make a couple of words too, but I recognize we're at time, so I'm going to try to be fast. First, let me thank every single person who has sat at this table, who has come to multiple meetings, who is engaged. When we began this 18 months ago, there was not a small dose of skepticism, it was large. There was a lot of folks that weren't quite sure we could actually get people to be sustained at a table for a year and a half to actually try to tackle a real issue. And so I really appreciate the commitment and the way people have shown up and engaged. Thank you. Mr. McDougall and Mr. Hill, grateful that you have stuck with it and helped lead that process. We also early on gave you a charge to be tough, go lay out what it's going to take, really push all those stakeholders and all of us hard, and you did that. I appreciate that. So thank you for the hard work that you all put into this. I do think this is a very significant step today, very significant. How many times have we all sat around and people have waved studies from the 1970s and then the 1980s, then the 1990s at us, constantly telling us the same story over and over again? This really is, I believe, the first time that regionally we have dedicated the time and the energy to try to outline and tackle what this looks like. I think we are outlining not just the region's transit needs, but in particular, of course, WMATA's very clear needs. We acknowledge it in a way that I don't think has been done before. I think we recognize it as real, and we lay out a strategy and a plan of how to address many of these structural problems. Now, there will also be no shortage of critics. Some will say we did not go big enough at all. And I, to Delegate Corman, kind of a yes, but I'm going to be a yes and, because there is a lot more work that has to be done. We will also have folks that tell us this is actually too big. It's in this tough climate right now. I don't know if we can do this. That is going to be a reality of building consensus and building compromise and trying to land in a space that I think as a region we can move forward. But I truly believe this is actually a generational decision that we are making, that we help hold each other accountable to, and that we are moving forward with. Understanding there's still a lot more work to be done. Nobody should be patting themselves on the back at the end of today, because there is just an incredible amount of work that remains, and the buy-in and the trust that continues to have to be built with all of our regional colleagues to continue moving this forward. I think it also helps hold WMATA accountable. I don't like it when WMATA comes to me and says, we're going to need X hundred million more, or we're going to shut down the bus, or we're going to shut down half the trains. There's no scenario I'm ever going to let that happen. And so as an elected leader, that feels like I'm being put over a barrel. Here, this allows us to really be able to start having accountability to WMATA in the same way the first number that came to us was significantly larger than the number that we see in front of us. It really balances a lot of what has to be done, and I believe will actually move us from bouncing from crisis to crisis to crisis within our transit agency and transit across the region into a sustainable and frankly visionary path of where we've got to go. Because just doing the same old thing is not going to get us where we got to go, and we can only patch together for so long. So it is generational, it is transformational, and this is a really important milestone and a step. And I'm grateful for everybody around this table, for all the staff at COG and WMATA that have actually helped make sure that we get there and do all the work. And of course, as a warning, there's still a lot more to be done. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to now, having no more comments, going to now move to a vote. What I'm going to do, just to make sure I lay out the process, don't say anything yet. First, I'm going to call for all those in favor. Those that want to be in favor, you're going to say aye. I'm then going to move to anybody who wants to be recorded as opposed. Then I'm going to record anybody who wants to be abstained. So that'll be the order in which I go through, just to make sure everyone knows what steps we're going through. So with that, I shall now call the vote. All of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Ms. Robinson is opposed. And all those like to abstain. Okay, I have Senator Augustine, Mr. McAndrew, and Chairman Mendelson is abstaining. I want to make sure I got the record reflected. Okay, the measure passes. Thank you very much. All right.
Before we
yes, Mr.
make sure the proxies are also counted in the affirmative.
Actually, thank you very much.
The record shows that.
Spot on, Mr. McKay. So I just want to make sure it is reflected correctly that Ms. Santos, you were voting for Tracy Hatton-Lowe.
Yes, Tracy wanted to vote.
And that is recorded as a yes. Mr. Smedberg, you were voting for Mr. Suravel in addition to yourself, and that is a yes.
He said yes.
And Mr. McKay, you're voting on behalf of Mr. Sickles, and he said yes.
Yes.
And I think I've got everybody else reflected.
Also, County Executive Aisha Brayboy, that's a yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. And then Mr. Conklin?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Just want to make sure we get it all recorded correctly. All right. Thank you all very much. Again, a lot of the work and conversation that have taken place over the last 18 months to get us to this point today has been a lot. And so again, our appreciation. This is a regional collaboration. It is an achievement and it should not go unrecognized. Yet we still have a lot of work to do. So the next step will be that these will come before both the COG Board of Directors and the WMATA Board of Directors at their joint meeting on November 17th. All that information will be sent well in advance. And following that meeting, we'll then be looking to each of you to help champion these recommendations, both at our local level with our boards, our councils, and our state as we move towards our 2026 legislative sessions. Mr. Smedberg, it has also been a pleasure co-chairing this with you. I am really grateful for the partnership, and I feel like I've gotten to know you so much better than just reading about you in the newspaper. And so it's been a real pleasure to do this and the work that we've done together. So I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the continued collaboration that we're going to have.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with you as well. And again, recognizing the WMATA and COG teams, the co-chairs, but also one other person who really was the glue here and kept everything together, and that's Nick Donahue and the work that he did. Yeah. And bringing his expertise and knowledge on both sides of the arguments to the table. So thank you, Nick. Yeah.
You have to officially conclude us. We got to gap us out.
There we go.
Well done. All right. Stand. Stand.